Welcome to the Healthy Church Staff Podcast. My name is Todd Rhodes. I'm one of the co-founders over at chemistrystaffing.com. Thanks for joining me today. Very excited to have you along with us. We're in the middle of a series, part 7 of 10, for what we're calling the 10 Commandments for Church Staff. We've already gone through 6. We're going to look at number 7 today. But as we do, just a little background on what I'm sharing here with these 10 commandments for church staff. These should hopefully be helpful to you. They're based on biblical principles. They'll be helpful to you, though, as you do your work, even today and in the future, in your role on your church staff. They're not a set of legalistic rules. They're not meant to be burdensome, but these principles, these 10 church staff commandments will help you protect you and your family and help you, hopefully, to maintain a healthy work-life balance. So we've looked at 6 so far. If you've missed any of those, go ahead and click on subscribe wherever you're listening to this. Go back and listen to those first 6. But today, commandment number 7, we're going to look at practice patience and restraint. Practice patience and restraint. And the biblical passage we're using for this commandment is James 1:19. Understand this, my brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. That's easier to read than it is to actually do sometimes, I realize, at least if you're anything like me. But the issue of practicing patience and restraint, particularly in your role as a leader in your church, is just incredibly important. Let's look at some examples of Jesus, because Jesus, when he lived on this earth, really had to cultivate this just like we do. Let's take a look at just a couple of examples. You remember in the New Testament, particularly in the Gospels, when Jesus is teaching his disciples? Man, talk about the need for patience. Some of those disciples are probably just like me if I was one of them, and they just didn't get it. They struggled every day, it seemed like, to understand what Jesus was trying to say. They struggled to understand his mission. And even when they doubted or they misunderstood, Jesus takes the time and he patiently explains his parables. He patiently explains his predictions. For example, in Mark, Jesus patiently explains the meaning of the parable of the sower to his disciples after they question him about it. Read that. It's in Mark chapter 4. But Jesus, as part of his ministry and part of his personality even, took to heart that, man, I need to practice patience. And even when I'm frustrated, especially when I'm frustrated, I need to practice some restraint. If you remember, as Jesus headed up to and leading to his crucifixion, it required a lot of patience and resilience on Jesus' part. He went to trial. He endured some ridicule, lots of ridicule, physical suffering, but he persevered. He did not retaliate with harsh words. In Luke, it describes Jesus as enduring the pain and mockery of the soldiers without any complaint. And he even offered forgiveness for those that were crucifying him. Take it to the next level, Jesus. So it's really important for us as church leaders that we practice patience and restraint. For each one of these commandments, we've been looking at some red flags, maybe some things that if you feel this way on a regular basis, often these might be red flags that, hey, I maybe need to take a step back and really work on this area of patience in my life and work in this area of restraint in my life. Okay, so here are some red flags. If you find that there's a pattern in your life of constantly being in an argument, especially those that kind of come out of nowhere, that they escalate quickly and they're not necessarily resolved in a healthy manner, it could suggest that you have a little bit of a lack of patience and restraint. Jesus was put in those instances where he could have just, and very seldom did he lose his temper. I can think of one instance, but in most instances, he used a lot of patience and restraint and didn't argue a lot. Okay, so if you see a pattern in your life of just frequent arguments or conflict, that could be a sign that you need to work on this today. Here's another one. Maybe you make reactive decisions. If you make decisions frequently in haste, especially during or immediately after after one of those high-stress situations or conflicts or arguments that we just talked about, it might be a sign that you're just lacking patience and restraint. Effective leaders can usually take time to think through things before making important decisions. So if you're making big decisions based on an argument that just happened or just rash without considering, it could be that you need to work on your patience. Here's another one. If you find that you're just in a constant state of agitation, you're just ticked all the time, or in a state of unrest, or a prolonged period of discord with your leadership team or in your church, it could suggest that you have a lack of patience and restraint. Strained relationships that are constantly strained, and maybe there's not just one, but there's a number of them. That's an indication that, again, that there may be some areas that you can work on here. And then we'll end with this one, red flag. Difficulty listening to others. If you have a pattern, and I do this sometimes, and it drives me crazy, it drives my wife crazy sometimes, go figure. If there's a pattern of interrupting others, or not fully hearing others' points of view, or acting dismissively towards others' feedback, it might suggest a lack of patience. Matter of fact, I would say it probably does. And look, we're all impatient at times. We all fail to show restraint at times, but Jesus set the example for us. And again, in church ministry, as people are looking to you to lead in your area of ministry, this commandment, this directive of practicing patience and restraint is huge. If you need to work on that today, I'm just guessing that God is going to show you, just because you've listened to this, God is going to show you when something like this happens in the next couple days, that you just really need to practice some patience and restraint, that you're going to remember these words and say, maybe I need to work on this here. So again, these 10 commandments are all based on biblical things, but I really think that these are 10 of the things that I've learned in over 30 years of working on our church staff, serving churches, just being in ministry generally, that have helped me stay. They've served as guardrails. They've served as checkpoints to let me know when things might be even just a little bit out of alignment, maybe a little bit awry in certain areas. So I'm hoping that by sharing some of these with you, that they'll help you to really be able to be where you're at for a long time, to lead a healthy work-life balance, that they'll not only work for you personally, but in your job, and in your ministry, and in your family as well. I would love to hear your feedback, or if you have any questions, you can always catch me at podcast. Just send an email to podcast@chemistrystaffing.com, podcast@chemistrystaffing.com, and I will be happy to reply to you. And if you have a question, maybe even answer it here on the podcast. If you like what you heard, go ahead and subscribe, and we will be here tomorrow when we talk about commandment number 8, which has to do with, this is a fun one, reconciliation. Join me tomorrow, and we'll dig right in.